All right. Okay. Wait a little second. Great day, great day, great day to you, beautiful people. I hope you're doing well. Hopefully, you're protecting your mental, finding time for an emotional release valve, and continue to strive to become beneficial. Continuing to strive to become beneficial. Today is Wednesday, so happy Wednesday. Happy Wednesday, and welcome to Reading with Jam. I am Jam, otherwise known as Jamal Calpin, and welcome to my YouTube channel. And if you're watching on YouTube, the Beneficial Black Man channel, or welcome to my Instagram if you're following me on Instagram. I am an actor, content creator, and somebody that just wants to help uh, people overcome mediocrity. More specifically, I want to help Black men overcome mediocrity so that they can live in vibrant excellence for glory and for good and be their best selves and be their best selves, which is why I'm doing this reading with Jam. I am trying to use my own skills, my own gifts to serve others by being an actor, by using my voice as a narrator. And I'm going to share the personal development content that I was going to read myself to continue to help me become a better man and a beneficial man and healthier, honestly, healthier all the way around. So, reading personal development content that's covering emotional intelligence, mental health, and anything else that can help us to prosper and be better and to, be more effective at relating and serving other people, I think is very important. Hence why I'm doing Reading with Jam, because I'm going to share with you the things that I'm learning so that it could hopefully help you in your own journey as well. We have been reading Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown, and it's been a really good book so far. The last couple of chapters have been a little heavy, um, but hopefully the next chapter is a little bit better. Or not to say that the last chapters were bad. It's just, early morning might be a little heavy to process things, uh, dealing with like grief and sadness. So, but today we are reading chapter 7 of Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. And the title of this chapter is Places We Go with Others. Places We Go with Others. So we got 30 minutes on the clock. Let's get into it. Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. Chapter 7. Places We Go with Others. Compassion, pity, empathy, sympathy, boundaries, and comparative suffering. Compassion and empathy. Across the research and clinical practice community, there are compelling debates happening right now about the role that compassion and empathy play and how we connect with people who are struggling. Some people argue that compassion is the best response. Some people argue that it's empathy. And some people think we need both for different reasons. Everyone is trying to answer this question. What's the most effective way to be in connection with and in service to someone who is struggling without taking on their issues as our own? It's an important debate that is frustratingly hijacked on occasion by folks who come up with new arbitrary definitions for emotions that are completely different from how we all use the terms. They change the meaning, then argue that the emotion is bad based on their new definitions. For example, someone might say that empathy is taking on all the feelings of another person, then argue that empathy is bad. Unfortunately, this approach is often misleading and self serving and puts no value on how we use the word. I would argue that a lot of this linguistic shell gaming is about wanting to be contrarian. There's nothing more seductive and clickable than a discovery that something we believe to be good is bad. Empathy is bad for you. When it comes to language, I'm a populist. How we, the collective, use language matters as much as, if not more than, arbitrary definitions that don't center lived experiences. If research is going to serve people, it has to reflect their experiences. There are significant differences between compassion and empathy that are vital to understand if we want to cultivate connection with others. There are also different definitions and types of empathy. I'm going to try to sort it out here using a combination of our research and that being done by other experts in the field. The relationship between compassion and empathy. Here's what I've learned. Compassion is a daily practice, and empathy is a skill set that is one of the most powerful tools of compassion. The most effective approach to meaningful connection combines compassion with a specific type of empathy called cognitive empathy. Let's get into it. Our working definition of compassion first emerged from the data about 10 years ago. It's been revised over time, but the core has remained the same and has stood the test of new data. Compassion is the daily practice of recognizing and accepting our shared humanity so that we treat ourselves and others with loving kindness, and we take action in the face of suffering. A very similar definition can be found in the research literature. Compassion is a virtuous response that seeks to address the suffering and needs of a person through relational understanding and action. What the majority of definitions share, including these, is that compassion includes action. It's not just feeling, it's doing. Compassion is fueled by understanding and accepting that we're all made of strength and struggle. No one is immune to pain or suffering. Compassion is not a practice of better than or I can fix you. It's a practice based in the beauty and pain of shared humanity. In her book, The Places That Scare You, the American Buddhist nun, Pema Chodron, writes, when we practice generated compassion, we can expect to experience our fear of pain. Compassion practice is daring. It involves learning to relax and allow ourselves to move gently toward what scares us. In cultivating compassion, we draw from the wholeness of our experience, our suffering, our empathy, as well as our cruelty and terror. It has to be this way. Compassion is not a relationship between the healer and the wounded, it's a relationship between equals. Only when we know our own darkness well can we present with, pick up. Only when we know our own darkness well can we be present with the darkness of others. Compassion becomes real when, oh crap, sorry. I gotta undo that. I was trying to highlight something and it didn't work. Compassion becomes real when we recognize our shared humanity. All right, let's keep going. This paragraph completely rearranged my parenting approach. I went from always wanting to fix things and make them better to literally sitting in the dark with my kids. Before I fully understood that the action part of compassion wasn't making things better or fixing, I would race to flip on the metaphorical lights when my kids were suffering. Now, I try to sit with them in the dark and show them how to feel the discomfort. Talk about moving gently toward what scares you. It's so painful. But now that I've been doing it for the past decade, I can see how my kids are developing that sense of shared humanity. I've even had the incredible fortune of witnessing them moving toward others in pain without trying to solve. But I'm not going to lie, it's still really hard. Sitting in the dark with them is not one bit easier in the moment than it was 10 years ago. Everything in my body is screaming, make it better, fix it. Maybe this is an example of how understanding emotion can be a life raft in a sea of turbulent feelings. Sometimes I have to desperately cling to what I know, rather than act on what I'm feeling in the moment. Pity. While compassion is not rescuing, it's also not pity. In fact, pity is the near enemy of compassion. In her book, Fierce Self Compassion, University of Texas researcher Kristen Neff writes, near enemy is a useful Buddhist concept referring to a state of mind that appears similar to the desired state. Hence, it is near, but actually undermines it, which is why it's an enemy. Far enemies are the opposite of emotions or experiences. The far enemy of compassion might be cruelty. What's interesting is that near enemies are often greater threats than far enemies because they're more difficult to recognize. That's interesting. As we build our understanding of emotion and experiences, the concept of near enemy is invaluable. To better understand how this works, let's look at compassion and pity. In bringing home the Dharma, Jack Kornfield writes, excuse me, the near enemy of compassion is pity. Instead of feeling the openness of compassion, pity says, oh, that poor person. I feel sorry for people like you, like for people like that. Pity sees them as different from ourselves. It sets up a separation between ourselves and others, a sense of distance and remoteness from the suffering of others that is affirming and gratifying to the self. Ooh. Compassion, on the other hand, recognizes the suffering of another as a reflection of our own pain. I understand this. I suffer in the same way. It is empathetic, a mutual connection with the pain and sorrow of life. Compassion is shared suffering. There's nothing worse than feeling pitied, and we have the research to show us why it feels so isolating. Pity involves four elements: a belief that the suffering person is inferior, a passive, self focused reaction that does not include providing help, a desire to maintain emotional distance, and avoidance of sharing in the other person's suffering. And addressing the big question about being with people without taking on their pain, Cornfield goes on to say, another enemy of compassion is despair. Compassion does not mean immersing ourselves in the suffering of others to the point of anguish. Compassion is the tender readiness of the heart to respond to one's own pick up. Compassion is the tender readiness of the heart to respond to one's own or another's pain without despair, resentment, or aversion. It is the wish to dissipate suffering. Compassion embraces those experiencing sorrow and eliminates cruelty from the mind. Empathy. Empathy, the most powerful tool of compassion, is an emotional skill set that allows us to understand what someone is experiencing and to reflect back that understanding. Empathy has a huge upside. Researchers Peter Paul Zurich and Herbert Scheithauer explain that empathy helps interpersonal decision making, facilitates ethical decision making and moral judgments, enhances short-term subject well-being, strengthens relational bonds, allows people to better understand how others see them, and enhances pro-social and altruistic behavior. More research pick up, sorry. Most researchers agree that there are at least two elements to empathy: cognitive empathy and affective empathy. Cognitive empathy, sometimes called perspective taking or mentalizing, is the ability to recognize and understand another person's emotions. Affective empathy, often called experience sharing, is one's own emotional attunement with another person's experience. Based on my work, I believe meaningful connection requires a combination of compassion and cognitive empathy or perspective taking. In simple terms, the empathy I'm talking about is understanding what someone is feeling, not feeling it for them. If someone is feeling lonely, empathy doesn't require us to feel lonely too, only to reach back into our own experience with loneliness so we can understand and connect. Affective empathy, feeling something along with the person who is struggling, is a slippery slope toward becoming overwhelmed and not being able to offer meaningful support. There are several models of and theories on empathy, but the one that aligns the most closely with our data is Teresa Wiseman's research. She studied empathy across helping professions and developed four attributes. We added a fifth attribute from Kristen Neff, whose work on self compassion has been a life changer for me. More on that to come. Teresa Wyman's attributes of empathy. 1. Perspective taking. What does that concept mean for you? What is the experience like for you? 2. Staying out of judgment. Just listen. Don't put value on it. 3. Recognizing emotion. How can I touch within how can I touch within myself something that helps me identify and connect with what the other person might be feeling? Check in and clarify what you're hearing. Ask questions. 4. Communicating our understanding about the emotion. Sometimes this is elaborate and detailed, and sometimes this is simple. And sometimes this is simply, shit, that's hard. I get that. And 5. Practicing mindfulness from Kristen Neff. This is not pushing away emotion because it's uncomfortable, but feeling it and moving through it. Again, empathy is a tool of compassion. We can respond empathetically. We can respond empathically only if we are willing to be present to someone's pain. If we're not willing to do that, It's not real empathy. A few researchers argue that empathy is a skill set that can be used to hurt people as well as in the service of compassion. I disagree. If you're connecting to how I feel so you can leverage my emotions, we shouldn't call that empathy. It makes no sense. We should call that manipulation or exploitation. Language matters. Don't use a word that has an almost universally positive connotation to describe a dangerous behavior that is hurtful. Use a word that issues a caution and demands accountability. Much more to come on this in the final chapter. The final chapter is so far away. Sympathy. Empathy is not sympathy. In fact, using the near enemy concept, we can definitely consider sympathy the near enemy of empathy. Rather than being a tool for connection, sympathy emerged in the data as a form of disconnection. Interesting. Sympathy is removed. When someone says, I feel sorry for you, or that must be terrible, they are standing at a safe distance. Rather than conveying the powerful me too of empathy, it communicates, not me, then adds, but I do feel sorry for you. Sympathy can even be a trigger for shame, which we will discuss in the next chapter. Researchers found that cancer patients on the receiving end of sympathy describe it as an unwanted, superficial, pity based response that, although well intended, is focused on the observer's discomfort rather than on alleviating the patient's distress. Patients prefer empathic and compassionate responses from others, seeing these responses as more helpful and more genuine than sympathy responses. Sympathy and pity are first cousins. They're the emotions of, we feel bad for you, from way over here where the kind of misery you're experiencing doesn't happen. Lulu Wang, the writer and director of one of my favorite films, The Farewell, tweeted, let's be clear, empathy and pity are not the same thing. When non POC, non female tell our stories, they may think they're creating empathy, but they unconsciously channel pity, which can often look like empathy, but it's not. The difference is hierarchy. This is one reason we need to dispel the myth that empathy is walking in someone else's shoes. Rather than walking in your shoes, I need to learn how to listen to the story you tell about what it's like in your shoes and believe you even when it doesn't match my experiences. The minute I try to put myself in your place rather than try to understand the situation from your perspective, our empathic connection unravels. Either I get sucked into the vortex of my own emotional difficulties, or because my experience doesn't match yours, I doubt what you're telling me. Hmm. We see this empathic miss all the time when we share our experiences with people whose identities afford them more physical, social, and emotional safety. I'm imagining not being called on in a meeting. I don't think it's so painful, says the man to the woman who is often overlooked, or the white woman to the black woman who is routinely ignored, versus hearing what that experience felt like for the person sharing the story and responding by saying, feeling invisible is painful. I also want to talk about the concept of compassion fatigue. This is a term used to refer to the emotional exhaustion or burnout that can occur among caregivers. The term comes up most frequently in research focusing on medical professionals, doctors, nurses, but is also used as related to other clinical professions, psychologists, therapists, social workers, and non-clinical service professions, customer service, teaching. There's compelling research that shows that compassion fatigue occurs when caregivers focus on their own personal distress reaction rather than on the experience of the person they are caring for. Focusing on one's own emotional reaction results in an ability to respond empathically to the person in need. In this view, the more appropriate term, rather than compassion fatigue, might be empathic distress fatigue. We're not hearing the story, we're inserting ourselves in the story. Last, the number one question I get when I'm teaching empathy is, How can I be empathic with someone if I haven't had their experience? It's a great question because it exposes a dangerous myth about empathy. Empathy is not relating to an experience, it's connecting to what someone is feeling about an experience. Hmm. When I'm working with groups, I often ask participants to raise their hands if they know joy, hurt, heartbreak, shame, grief, love, etc. At the end, after all of the hands have been raised to every emotion, I say, you're qualified. You don't need to be the expert or experience what they've experienced. You need to connect to your own experiences in a thinking way that creates emotional resonance. Oh, yeah, I know that feeling. I'm not going to fall into it right now, but I know it, and I can communicate with you in a way that makes you know you're not alone. Empathy misses. 1. Sympathy versus empathy. I feel sorry for you. The person who responds with sympathy, I feel sorry for you, rather than empathy, I get it, I feel with you, and I've been there. The subtext of this response is distance. These things don't happen to me or people like me. If you want to see a shame cyclone turn deadly, throw one of these at it. Oh, you poor thing, or bless your heart. 2. Judgment. You should feel shame. The person who hears this story and actually feels shame for you. The friend gasps, the friend gasps and confirms how horrified you should be. Then there is an awkward silence. Then you have to make this person feel better by convincing them that you're not a terrible person. Mm. 3. Disappointment. You've let me down. The person who needs you to be the pillar of worthiness and authenticity. This person can't help you because they are too disappointed in your imperfections. You've let this person down. 4. Discharging discomfort with blame. This feels terrible. Who can we blame? You? Because shame is visceral and contagious, we can feel it for other people. This person immediately needs to discharge the discomfort and vulnerability of the situation by blaming and scolding. They may blame, scold you. What were you thinking? Or they may look for someone else to take the fall. Who was that guy? We'll kick his butt. Caution. Parents can fall easily into this when a child shares a shaming story with them. How did you let this happen? Good morning. Good morning. Themis, good morning, everything, everybody podcast by Daryl. I'm sorry, I read your name, the whole name. Good morning. Good morning. I appreciate y'all showing up. We are reading, sorry, Instagram folks, but we are reading Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. And we're in chapter 7. And I think it's Places You Go with Others. So we're going to keep going. And right now we're covering empathy misses. So if you're dealing or trying to be empathetic to other people or whatever, these are ways to not be empathetic. These are ways to not show up empathically for other people. Uh, close that. Thank you. All right. Okay. Next one. Number 5. Minimize, avoid. Let's make this go away. We minimize and avoid when we want hard feelings to go away. Out of their own discomfort, this person refuses to acknowledge that you're in pain and or that you're hurting. You're exaggerating. It wasn't that bad. You rock. You're perfect. Everyone loves you. Number 6. Comparing, competing. If you think that's bad, this person confuses connecting with you over shared experiences with the opportunity to one up you. That's nothing. Listen to what happened to me one time. Number 7. Speaking truth to power. Don't upset people or make them uncomfortable. You hold someone accountable for language, comments, or behavior that marginalizes or dehumanizes others, and it causes discomfort or conflict. When this person observes this or hears your story of what happened, they respond with, "I can't believe you said that to your boss," or "I can't believe you went there," or "You can't talk about that stuff with people," versus an empathic response of, "That must have been hard. You were really brave," or "It's hard to stand up for what you believe in. Thank you." Number 8, advice giving, problem solving. I can fix it. I can fix this and I can fix you. Sometimes, when we see pain, our first instinct is to fix it. This is especially true for those of us whom people seek out to help with problem solving. In these instances, rather than listen and be with people and their emotion, we start fixing. All right. Next section, I think this might be the last one of the chapter. Boundaries. Boundaries are a prerequisite for compassion and empathy. We can't connect with someone unless we're clear about where we end and they begin. If there's no autonomy between people, then there's no compassion or empathy, just enmeshment. This has probably been one of the most significant, soul shaking learnings of my career. For a couple of years, it made no sense to me at all. Why did all of the compassion practitioners, therapists, counselors, monks that I interviewed talked about the importance of boundaries? Why did the lack of boundaries and judgment seem to go hand in hand in the data? In The Gifts of Imperfection, I write, the heart of compassion is really acceptance. The better we are at accepting ourselves and others, the more compassionate we become. Well, it's difficult to accept people when they are hurting us, or taking advantage of us, or walking all over us. This research has taught me that if we really want to practice compassion, we have to start by setting boundaries and holding people accountable for their behavior. I was recently struggling with a boundary issue. Yes, still. And I told my therapist that I refuse to go back to, I don't know what that is, to, to saccharine. Sorry, that I like solid better. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Before I really understood how impossible it is to be compassionate to myself or others when people are taking advantage of me and when I'm prioritizing being liked over being free, I was much sweeter but less authentic. Now I'm kinder and less judgmental, but also firmer and more solid, occasionally salty. The best definition of boundaries still comes from my friend Kelly Ray Roberts. Kelly Ray was an oncology social worker who followed her dreams and became a prolific, globally recognized artist. After experiences with some of her art, students copy. Sorry. Okay, pick up. After experiencing with some of her art students copying her work and selling it, she addressed her art community with a very straightforward blog post on what's okay and what's not okay in term in terms of using her images. For example, it's okay to be inspired by her work, but not okay to copy it and sell it. This is a simple but profound way to set boundaries. As we say in our organization, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. Too often, we forget about the what is okay part, and that leads to unnecessary disconnection. When people set a boundary with us, we can feel that they're denying us our right to our thinking and feeling. When we explain upfront what's okay, we move the focus to where it belongs. This expression of our feelings or thinking is the problem. It's okay to be pissed. It's not okay to raise your voice and pound on the table. It's okay to change your mind. It's not okay to assume that I'm okay with the changes without talking to me. It's okay to want to be able to do the things your friends are allowed to do. I totally get that. What's not okay is breaking our rules to do them. It's okay to disagree with me, but it's not okay to ridicule my ideas and beliefs. That was boundaries. This might be the last section, sorry. Comparative suffering. Empathy is not finite, and compassion is not a pizza with 8 slices. When you practice empathy and compassion with someone, there is not less of these qualities to go around. There is more. Love is the last thing we need to ration in this world. But fear and scarcity trigger comparison, and even pain and hurt are not immune to being assessed and ranked. Because COVID unleashed such massive fear and anxiety, we saw comparative suffering everywhere. My husband died, and that grief is worse than your grief over missing your daughter's wedding. I'm not allowed to talk about how disappointed I am about my job changing because my friend just found out that his wife has COVID. You're worried about your teenager becoming disconnected and isolated during quarantine when thousands of people in India are dying. What we fail to understand, those were examples. What we fail to understand is that the family in India doesn't benefit more if you conserve your concern only for them and withhold it from your child who is also suffering. Yes, perspective is critical. But I'm a firm believer that sharing how we feel, even complaining, is okay as long as we piss and moan with a little perspective. Hurt is hurt. And every time we honor our own struggle and the struggles of others by responding with empathy and compassion, the healing that results affects all of us. And that was the end of chapter 7. Um, I like this chapter as I've liked all of the previous chapters. The biggest thing that stood out to me was her clarifying empathy, uh, which is kind of heavy when you think about it. Like she gave the example of empathy, the I guess the known idea is like, yeah, let me try to walk in your shoes and understand. And her clarifying it as in like, no, you trying to place yourself in that person's situation or whatever isn't actually given space for you to understand what they're feeling. That's eye opening for me because it's so true. Because when you're trying to put yourself in somebody else's position or experience or whatever, you're still taking you with you. You know what I'm saying? Like, all right, you just lost your job or whatever. And right now you're telling me that you're having a hard time, you're sad about it. If I try to put myself or insert myself in that situation, I'm immediately going to be like, how would I feel about it? What would I do about it? What would be my response to my boss or my job? And in that, I'm overshadowing you. I'm no longer thinking about you. I'm no longer thinking and trying to understand what you're going through. And that's very subtle. That's a very subtle like way of actually not caring for the other person, even though you think you are. And that's the tricky part with intention, the difference between intentions and impact. Like you may have the intention, you may think, "Oh yeah, I'm doing something good for this person or whatever," but the impact is trash. The impact is trash. And I've experienced that in so many different ways, not just, in romantic relationships, but also caring, trying to relate to other people. Like you may think, as another example, oh, that's a 30 minutes is up. As another example, thinking that you are encouraging somebody. I think what she said was like speaking truth to power or whatever. You think in that situation, oh, if I give you advice or if I try to fix it, if I try to show up in this way, that it's actually going to help the person. But you're making it worse because you're not listening to them. You're not making room for their to highlight their pain and their suffering and giving them room to feel. And I would say, from my own experience and what I've seen, particularly for men, we're not good at that. I'm sure there are some men out there who are good at that, but I think we usually default to like, how can we fix this? Because we don't want to deal with these emotions. We don't want to deal with these feelings. Like I hear you, but all right, let's get this going. How can we fix this? How can we get this over? Because I don't want to talk about this. And I think something that she mentioned in there is like one of the reasons people avoid compassion. And I think this goes back to the other previous chapters too. A lot of people struggle with compassion and empathy because it then forces you to have to like go inside. It forces you to then touch aspects of yourself and of your soul because you need that to be able to relate and commune with other people. But I think so many of us are either afraid or don't know how to manage and navigate those feelings that we want to do whatever we can logically to avoid it and get out of it. So, like, yeah, you lost your job. All right, I'm sorry. Let's go get drinks. And then you're going to get a new job. We don't have to sit here and talk about it, though. We don't have to sit here and talk about it. I don't want to know that you're in pain. I don't want to know that you're suffering. I don't want to know this stuff. But I will be here and I will try to help you fix it. Why? Because I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to talk about it. And so, like, I thought that was a big deal to me. That's something that really stood out. And then also the near cousins thing. She mentioned like how sympathy is a near cousin to empathy, and how pity is a near cousin to compassion. And it's so strange maybe it's not strange, but with all of this soul work, with all of the messiness, and so in like the past couple of chapters, we talked about dealing with places you go when you're sad or like when you're struggling or whatever, right? And in those places, in our soul and our experience, it's very messy. It can be very, very messy. Like you can be happy to see somebody, but because they hurt you at some point in time, you have this visceral reaction. It's like, oh, your childhood friend, I haven't seen you in such a long time. It's good to see you, but I know what you did to me in high school, and you never apologized for it. And I don't trust you. And it's like this complicated back and forth of feelings. And so much of humanity is like that. And I think a lot of us don't like that. Like we want it to be either or. I don't want to have to be in the soup of feelings. And I get it. But if we want to be better humans and better people, and if we want to be beneficial men for other people, we have to be able to jump in the soup. We have to be there. We have to learn how to be more compassionate, learn how to be more empathetic, and know the differences between showing pity towards somebody. It's like, oh, yeah, you lost your job. It's like, well, that sucks for you, SOL. Like, I'm sorry. Like, you're a poor, unfortunate soul. Shout out to Little Mermaid. Um, or having sympathy and not realizing that it puts distance between you and person when people are looking for compassion and empathy and when they are going through stuff, they don't want distance, they want closeness. But again, that's scary a lot of times for us because if somebody's getting close to us, that means we have to be vulnerable too. That means we have to take the risk of exposing or touching pain in us as well. But that's like the major component of compassion, saying that like I have that hurt too, or I can understand that hurt too. And I'm willing to sit here with you in that. I don't know. I don't know. I thought this was another good chapter. Definitely giving some more details and like eye opening for me, especially with the idea of like putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. Like, no, just take some time to listen and understand the shoes, like them walking in their own shoes. Like, I don't have to hop in their shoes because, yeah, I'm going to look at it differently. What I need to do is look at them, hear them. What is it? Everybody wants to be seen, valued, heard, and understood. So instead of trying to put yourself in the shoes and see it how you do, excuse me, see them, hear them, understand them, value them in that experience. But no, that can be challenging. That can be hard. But I think that's why it's important that we read this kind of stuff to help us have a better perspective and help us to look at things differently so that we can serve ourselves well, but also serve other people well too. Because last thing, and I'm gonna stop because I feel like I've been talking too long. Um, if we don't know, because she mentions in this chapter about boundaries, if we don't know the language and the what these different things are, it then becomes difficult for us to set up good boundaries. It then becomes very difficult for us to be able to communicate to others what we need. So yeah, you might be trying to share something with a friend, a brother, a family member, a parent, or whatever, and you're like, "Hey, I really just want you to listen to me and understand. I'm going through some stuff, and I'm just looking for a space to kind of like express myself." But every time you go talk to your dad or your best friend, all they do is just immediately give you like answers. They don't really listen to you. That sucks. So you're looking for like a space to feel seen, valued, heard, and understood. But if you don't have that language, if you don't know how to set up those boundaries or express those expectations, now you just keep feeling let down and you feel more and more alone. And that's not healthy. It's not helpful. But if we don't know what's going on with us, it's hard for us to communicate when we need. And I think that's why, again, one of the reasons I want to read this on my channel, and I want to encourage Black men to keep studying this stuff so that we can better understand ourselves, so that we can better relate, and so that we can better understand and serve those around us too. So I think that's part of that's my belief. That's part of our call as men, that we are supposed to be serving for glory and for good and being beneficial to those around us. The other thing that I thought was interesting was the comparative suffering thing makes me think about all the times as a kid, whenever, eating food or eating dinner, and it's like, I don't want this or whatever. And your parents are like, think about the kids in Africa. Think about the kids in Africa who don't have anything to eat. What are you complaining for? And stuff like that. It's like, oh no, why are you making me like, I can't, even if I don't eat this, it's not going to help them. You know what I'm saying? Like, are we going to ship this to them? Like, that's not going to, anyways, whatever. I feel like that situation is something complex that people have to work through. But thank you all for joining me this morning for another reading with Jam. My name is Jamal Calpin. Thank you for those who showed up on my YouTube channel. I appreciate you. For those on Instagram, thank you, thank you, thank you. I hope you all have a wonderful and amazing day. And I will be back tomorrow to continue reading Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. Hope you all receive something from it. Make sure to protect your mental, find time for an emotional release valve. And I will talk to you all later. Peace.